Ooh. Yay! We're here. We're doing it. Welcome to Herb and Garden Days, plural, because tonight is the keynote and tomorrow is the actual event. And so if you want to keep your screen on, you are welcome to. Everybody's muted, but we are recording this. So if you don't want to be on the recording, feel free to just turn the video part off. So I am Jessica LaBrie of Blackbird's Daughter Botanicals, and very, very grateful to be introducing Maria Noel Groves as our fabulous keynote speaker tonight. So I do have to say that I was tickled to be able to introduce you, because for a very long time, I know that you are a humble person and you are not self-aggrandizing at all, but for a long time, every time your birthday comes up, I've wanted to be like, this woman has been so important. And then I've been like, okay, no, pull it back. So, but tonight is my night. So Maria is amazing. Maria is one of the co-founders of the New Hampshire Herbal Network. And if it wasn't for her, we would not have the New Hampshire Herbal Network. We would not be a chapter of the American Herbalists Guild, and we would not be gathering for Herb and Garden Days. She is a clinical herbalist and runs Wintergreen Botanicals, which is a fabulous herb school. And she is also the author of Body into Balance and Grow Your Own Herbal Remedies, and which are now textbooks at many herb schools, including mine, because they're amazing. And I think one of the things that I love the most about you, Maria, is how unceasingly generous you are with the information that you have. And for as long as I have been following you and then known you, and your willingness and desire to share herbal knowledge and be open to the fact that a lot of different people have a lot of different herbal perspectives, but here is what you have gleaned, and then share it, has been such an amazing pillar of our herbal community and really inspirational. And I am grateful, and we are all grateful to you for that. So just a little teeny bit more about Maria. So she's been working with herbs for 25 years. She's certified by Michael Moore's Southwest School of Botanical Medicine, completed studies at Sage Mountain, Heart Song Farm, and Lycanwood Herbals. And of course, she's a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. And her main practice focuses on education and empowerment through classes and writing and working with folks. And really through the pandemic, she has been like creating this amazing access to herbal education online for people. And as well as now, I think your in-person classes are starting up again. So Maria's just a really fabulous person, and we are extremely grateful to have somebody who is such a prolific and fabulous professional author, as well as an inspiration to be here in our tiny little state. So thank you so much, Maria. I'm gonna turn it over to you now.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm just gonna pin this, so let's see, pin that so we stay on here. Thank you, that was really generous. Like, that was really amazing and honoring to hear all those things. And I, deeply respect you, Jessica, and I'm super grateful for all the folks who are past and present officers of New Hampshire Herbal Network, because it's a lot of work to, for our little organization to make things happen. And even if I, was one of the people to get the ball rolling, I'm really grateful for the folks who have taken it and continued with it, so that I can just sort of step back and do my own thing. And I don't know if I'm that humble. I'd like to think I am, but I don't know that I really am. But thank you. I appreciate all those kind words. So I'm going to be doing something a little different for myself today, and that is to give more of an inspirational speech. When Kellie asked me to do the keynote, I was like, I don't know, like keynotes are like inspirational, and I'm very much a a fact, information driven, like here's how you use this herb and here's how you make this remedy. And I usually just kind of talk off the cuff with just a little bit of an outline to go by. And that's how I teach. And that's what I'm used to. So doing something that's a little bit more on the opening an event inspirational is very, very new. I've never done it before. And then also, as I was writing this keynote presentation, it really made sense to write it more like a whole big written piece. And then it seemed like it really makes more sense to read it as a written piece. But reading things out loud is actually not one of my skills. It's one of the reasons why I generally just teach off the cuff with a recording. And so when I'm teaching rather. And so I'm going to be reading off of it on my screen at the same time. And I'm going to occasionally change the photos. So there'll be a little bit of a pause as I change the photo so that you're looking at beautiful, beautiful plants in the background as we talk about, amazing, beautiful things, as well as some really challenging things. And so I apologize in advance if me, reading things off is a little bit awkward. And I hope you enjoy the talk and that you do, learn some new things, because I certainly have tried to pack some good information, especially around our herbal history, into here, but also, just hopefully it will be a little bit inspiring, because plants are amazing. And I just really wanted to try to impart the many, many amazing ways in which plants have been the silver lining and one of the things that has held us through all these really challenging times in the past year and a half, as well as just throughout history as well. So I'm going to dive right in. And again, apologies that I'm going to be reading as opposed to just speaking. So in the past year, rocked by threats and realities of pandemic disease, shutdowns, and just the sense of a world spinning out of control, millions of people have turned to herbalism to ground us and empower us in the face of fear and uncertainty. Herb sales have skyrocketed, class capacities have buckled with this increased demand of people just really wanting to know about plants and use plants. Herb and spice companies have sold out with this boom of interest in using these plants as spice cabinet medicine, for home cooking, for preserving the garden's abundance. If you tried to go buy something like mustard seed, you might have discovered that last year. Seed companies, as well as mom and pop garden centers, have also really struggled. They've been blessed and struggled with this increased demand and to keep food and medicinal seeds in stock with this gardening boom. And I'm going to change my photo here. So just bear with me as I do that, and then change my screen back to my words. So, as we've been unable to gather indoors with other people, to be able to visit friends and family, and to be able to just go to work during these shutdowns, many of us turned our attention outdoors. And so even people who never really spent a lot of time outdoors, those of us who are herbalists and herb people probably already were spending a lot of time outdoors, but we had this new bustling interest in that for our activity, for our entertainment, and also for our solace. And so we walked the neighborhood. We gardened a lot. Sometimes we succeeded and sometimes we failed. We hiked, we camped, we swam, we paddled, we biked, we skied. We avidly read, listened to, watched, and learned whatever we could about, especially herbs, but also other things too. We worked really hard to transform our backyards into oases so that we could entertain our friends and our families at a distance, as well as entertain ourselves and just have a beautiful place to be. And campsites filled up really fast. Gear for getting outdoors sold out. Stock availability has really been crippled by this increased demand for these outdoorsy and gardeny and plant type things, in addition to challenges from, for the companies themselves, because they have a lot of pandemic related restrictions, or employees who are sick, or they're not able to get supplies because of difficulties at other businesses and importing. And so it's been really challenging. And yeah, we definitely did increase our spending on places like Amazon and big chains, because that was the easiest way for us to get stuff and get home delivery. But also, so many of our herb shops and our farms and our garden centers really rose to this challenge of trying to figure out how to do business when nobody can like leave. And we're trying not to come into contact with one another. And so direct farmer to consumer shopping really increased. I talked to farmers who are, struggling with the fact that maybe their farmers markets were temporarily suspended, but they had more customers than ever contacting them directly to come, say pick things up at the farm or take part in their CSA. They got creative with things like curbside pickup and delivery and shipping, and these really small businesses with very few, very little, prior experience and training got a crash course in how to sell things online and take orders online or via email or telephone. Not just the farmers, but also a lot of these herb shops as well. Change my picture here. And so herbalists and farmers have really been among our heroes during this pandemic. They're among our many different heroes in this pandemic. And, certainly business for them has increased. So that has been a blessing for them. But they've also really worked very long, hard hours to meet this demand, to have to adapt to all the different challenges that the pandemic has given them that have made them have to change the way that they normally do things, and to field the incessant, wonderful, but also incessant emails and phone calls just from people, trying to get stuff, asking questions about stuff. How do I grow stuff? What do I do for this or that? It's been a lot. And I remember talking to one of my colleagues, actually Jessica, and we were saying, like our lives are so blessed, but it takes so much work just to get so much more work just to get the status quo done, which is, a beautiful thing and an exhausting thing simultaneously. So herb schools converted from in-person classes to to online programs overnight, which was no easy feat, especially for a lot of herb schools that maybe didn't have a lot of tech skills previously. A lot of herb schools also added additional classes and courses to meet the increasing demand of folks looking for online learning. We devoted hundreds of hours to gathering and compiling remedy kit supplies to help our distant students connect with the plants in their own homes when we knew that your ability to just go out and get them, it was really challenged. And, many of our practitioners, herbal and otherwise, transitioned from in-person to virtual or even outdoor consultations. We finally all pretty much figured out how to use Zoom, which has its advantages. And we definitely have spent way too much time in front of our screens. But one of the interesting things is that instead of using screens to disconnect from each other, we've been depending upon this technology to connect and reconnect with each other during this time. So all that said, it's really nice now to be able to, even though we're on the computer right now and on Zoom right now, it's really nice to start to be able to put down our devices and actually gather in person again and let go of our masks and give each other hugs. Whether or not we're hugging everybody, but at least a few select folks. And that's just been really, really, really nice to be making that transition. So in spite of all this extra time and work that the pandemic demand has required of us, many of the herbalists, clinics, and education centers have gone even deeper into offering free, low cost, and scholarship options for their classes and consultations so that they can serve a broader and increased community of need. And they're driven not only by the pandemic and all the challenges that the pandemic has created, but also we're becoming increasingly aware of, and we have an increased demand for supporting communities that have been traditionally marginalized and underserved. And I think for those of us who are in more privileged situations, it's been a gradual eye-opening experience and a reckoning. And that's driving a lot of this, of trying to figure out how we can do better in serving and supporting more folks across the country and across the world. So these groups include low income, rural, folks who are unemployed, which of course was an increasing group of people this past year and a half, elders, immigrants, Black folks, Indigenous folks, other communities of color, trans and gender nonconforming folks, and other people with limited accessibility. And one of the silver linings of these virtual times has been that to some extent we can more easily reach more people right in their homes, as long as they have access to devices and internet, which is of course not everybody. So lots, I'm telling you stuff you already know about, but we're gonna transition here in a moment. So let's take a moment to just really think and, express gratitude to frontline workers, to healers, to herbalists, to medical workers, to shop owners, to farmers, to educators, for all that they've done to help us and support us and adapt to this past year and a half. Let's also recognize simultaneously how much those of us in privileged communities have, really woken up to this inequality in the past year or so, and the many, many, many ways in which this pandemic and everything that goes along with it has made that wealth gap and privilege gap even wider. So it has deepened that divide, not only for wealth and privilege, but also health, access to healthcare, education, respect for one another, access to pretty much everything. And even life itself has, that divide has gotten even deeper in this past year and a half, across the country, in our own communities, and across the globe. But at the same time, because that's kind of heavy, it's important, but it's also kind of heavy. Let's also take a moment to step back and appreciate all that we as individuals have been through this past year. Because while it's certainly been harder for some than others, and I know myself, I've been in a pretty blessed and privileged position, but this past year and a half has been a challenge for everybody. And we should definitely give ourselves, treat ourselves with a little bit of kid gloves and give ourselves some appreciation for that. We all deserve a little bit of a timeout right now, and to get a bit of a pass on all the expectations that we've set for ourselves that we didn't quite meet. I know that I thought like, oh, well, since the world shut down, I'll just do all this big list more of things. And not everything happened. And, maybe we gained a few pounds, and maybe, things just didn't quite go as well as we expected. But let's give ourselves a pass on that, and, an opportunity to refocus on self-care, on kindness to ourselves and others, and that TLC that we all, I think, really have been craving and, really want to focus on and make time for. Let's recognize that we've all experienced a lot of smaller traumatic events alongside one huge collective trauma in this past year and a half, and that we all deserve a little extra time and space to heal from that. And Canadian poet and anti-bullying activist Shane Coyson urges us, if your heart is broken, make art with the pieces. Isn't that beautiful? So the plant world is here to support us in that process in so many different ways. So, and we as herbalists, know and teach these pretty regularly, but just in case you don't know, here are a lot of different ways in which we can turn to the plant world to support us in that timeout and in that space of collective and individual healing. So we can do things that are really practical. We can sip nervine and nutritious and aromatic and restorative teas like holy basil and lemon balm and oat straw, rose, nettle, and linden. We can incorporate deeply nourishing powders, tinctures, and concentrates into our routine with herbs like astragalus, nettle, ashwagandha, reishi, turkey tail. We can garden our own land if we have it, or borrowed or shared land, or we can even, just set up a small windowsill garden or a patio container garden. There are a lot of really great herbs. We don't need to have a huge, multi-acre garden. We could just have like one little pot with one or two herbs in it and have that opportunity to connect, because each plant that we tend is an opportunity for relationship, for connection, and for healing. And it's an opportunity to take a moment out of our busy day to just stop and interact with that plant, to nibble or inhale or just simply appreciate it. And it just shifts us a little bit and supports us in our healing process. We can step into wild spaces, whether it's the forest or river edges, abandoned lots, or even just like look at a pavement crack and see what's growing in it. And we can meet the plants that show up around us and learn their names and their ways, and realize that we are surrounded by plant allies every day, everywhere. We can simply appreciate, and even if we don't know all their names and we haven't learned a whole lot, we can just go out and appreciate and enjoy being enveloped in this sort of nameless sea of beautiful green as well. But it's really cool once you get to know the plants. By connecting in relationship with the plants in this way, it's a natural segue too that we'll probably become stewards and protectors and advocates for the land, the planet, and public access to that green space. We can also support ourselves with plants by just simply observing a tree or some other plant throughout the year and just gain strength from seeing how that plant or that tree meets and overcomes its own challenges. We can hug a tree or meditate under a tree, just like be there with the trees. We can walk barefoot on the earth and feel more connected to it. We can snip a bouquet of blooms. It could be just something simple like, wild roses or wild daisies, and let that adorn our kitchen tables or our desks. It's amazing what just a shift of perspective that can bring. We can eat fresh herbs in our daily cuisine and appreciate that vitality and the infusion of fresh flavor that they provide. We can take time to inhale plant aromas, whether we're just like rubbing and sniffing them or working with essential oils or making our own aromatic products. But we can inhale those plant aromas and also experience the beauty of energetic flower essences and utilize that for healing and also to shift our mindset and to create very safe and pleasurable spaces around us. We can incorporate plants into our daily rituals and our spiritual practices. We can learn our individual heritage of plants from our own ancestry, and we can also learn the history of our own unique ancestry around herbal medicine and plant use. And we can also learn the heritage of plants in the spaces in which we inhabit, even if we don't know what our ancestry may be. And here in New Hampshire, we have an imperfect but really rich history of Abenaki indigenous people, European colonists, rural healers, the Shakers, Samuel Thompson, who's a pretty historic person who we'll get to in a little bit. And our state is also a new home to modern refugee and immigrant communities. We're pretty fortunate here in New Hampshire that we're among the healthiest, the wealthiest, the most educated, the greenest, and the most privileged states in the nation. And we have pretty easy access to green space. If you've ever flown over our state and then flown over other states, it's pretty striking that how much more space that we have that's just devoted to forest and lakes versus having it be the circuit network of developed land or farmland that's being heavily cultivated, where we're really, really, really blessed to have that accessible to us. And so we have these wild spaces, we have forests, mountains, ocean, waterways. We have surprisingly easy access to local food from small and mid-scale farms, including organic farms. We're in proximity of some of the world's most advanced modern medicine. And in New Hampshire, we also have a really wide array of all sorts of holistic practitioners as well. So our toolbox is really rich and really full. We're also one of the least diverse states of the nation, and there is a really big gap of inequality, even though, we have a lot of folks in those more privileged spaces. There's a pretty big gap between those folks and the folks who are in the less privileged spaces. And so we do have quite a bit of inequality there for folks who are lower income, as well as our increasing communities of racial and ethnic diversity. And so it's good to take some time to just recognize that and share our bounty when we have a bounty to share, and also support BIPOC-led programs. And if you're not familiar with the term BIPOC, it's B for Black, I for Indigenous, and POC for people of color. Although certainly there are a lot of folks in marginalized communities beyond only the BIPOC community. We can share our plants and remedies with others. This is another really great way that we can heal, not only with communities that are traditionally marginalized, but also just with like anybody and everybody, whomever we feel drawn to share with. So when we share our plants and our remedies with other people, it fills our cup in a lot of ways and also promotes healing across a greater landscape. We can create opportunities for us to connect with others who share our love of plants and build a vibrant plant human community. And, that's really one of the big things that the New Hampshire Herbal Network has been really instrumental, not just me, but all the people who have been part of the Herbal Network. That very first event that we had, there was so much. I'm not an event organizer. I find it really stressful to event organize. And I only did the very first one. After that, we had other people do all the event organizing. And, that very first one, there's so much that went went into it, and there was like stress and personalities and all of that. And then when we actually had the event, it was so beautiful. We were at the Audubon Center at Massabesic Audubon at the time, and it was a beautiful day, and everybody was coming out and hugging each other, and people who didn't know each other were meeting each other, and we were sharing things, and we were learning what everybody else was good at. And it just was like this amazing spark of a moment. And when we take the time to have these kinds of connections, whether they're big or small, it really is a beautiful thing beyond like this, the actual actions of teaching a class or, putting together an event or vending. It's that connection that really, really matters. So as we do all this, we work with the plants to strengthen the roots of ourselves as well as our communities. Lovely burdock there. Resilience comes from strong roots, says herbalist and author Rosalie de la Forêt. So learning and practicing plant medicine and supporting broader access to it can be a radical act of resistance and strength in and of itself. And I have another photo just because. So we've got our beautiful thyme there. So plants have bolstered common everyday people for as long as we have coexisted on the planet. Many of our favorite medicinal and edible herbs, such as thyme, pictured there, although not that exact species of thyme that's pictured there, bear the species name vulgaris. And vulgaris indicates that these plants grew commonly in the wild and were traditionally used by the common people, as opposed to the elite people in power. So plants like thyme, mugwort, self-heal, lady's mantle, barberry, and primrose are among these valued plants that have the species name vulgaris, and they didn't discriminate based on income or status for who could use them for healing. These are really important plants. And throughout history, herbalism has had a really, really rocky history throughout these centuries of disease and vitality, freedom versus backlash. But even in the darkest times, and there have been much darker times than we have just experienced, herbalism and our devotion to plant medicine still survives, and it ultimately makes us stronger and healthier and more resilient and more connected. By understanding these dark places in our history and the people and the plants that have helped us overcome them, we can find strength and inspiration in our own challenging times. And I just love this photo of bleeding heart, which we use as a flower essence. Use is not a nice word, but we rely upon as a flower essence for letting go of things.
We can't see your screen.
Oh, you can't see my screen. Have you not been able to see my screen this whole time?
We have not.
I can.
No.
I'm so.
I
sent
can.
you a little thing
You
in
can?
the text, but
I actually no. I think you can. I think it might just be you. Can other people? Can other people see it? If you can, use the reactions to say yes or no. Or if you're physically on camera, you can do a thumbs up or some thumbs down. I see a chat. Let me look in the chat real quick.
Oh, I apologize. Then it's just me. Sorry. Carry on.
Okay, cool. Okay, good. No offense. I'm glad it was only you, Jessica. So we have that bleeding heart photo. So bleeding heart is a flower essence that we often rely upon for like letting go of our traumatic experiences and just helping us with that process. So let me get back to this again. So here are just a couple different times throughout history and some of our famous folks throughout history. It is going to start off a little bit white male centric. Not that there's anything wrong with being a white male that's educated in power. Those are the folks who often have had the control to make big sweeping changes in healthcare and medicine. But we'll get to some other folks as well. So we do have a little bit broader representation. But these are some of our heroes that have really triumphed for people's access to healthcare and for, and just to help support people and help speak up for the plants as well. So in ancient, we're going to start pretty far back. So in ancient Greco-Roman times, the Greek physician Hippocrates, who I'm pretty sure you've all heard of, wrote the Hippocratic Oath. And that oath held healers to a higher standard of care. And there was a reason he wrote it, because not everybody was doing the things that were in this oath. And in it, the physician promises to care for the sick, to not withhold treatment if somebody can't pay, to avoid harm and wrongdoing of the clients, and to hold the personal and medical information of those clients confidential. He was also really famous for believing in the power of nutrition and holistic health, and recommended that we let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. And then, flash forward a little while later, we've got Europe in the Dark Ages. And during the Dark Ages, there was a lot of really low quality medicine happening. This is when people would just like have to get drunk as they sawed off somebody's leg. And there was lots of bacterial infections and diseases and things like that. And just really, really not good things. It wasn't a good place. It wasn't a good place and time of history to be sick. And there was filth, there was disease. And part of the reason for that was that we had a lot of elitist religious patriarchy that was coveting this and really controlling dramatically who had access to healing. And that was just one of many reasons why that was happening. And during these times, we burned up to potentially 9 million women midwives and healers, calling them witches, because they were using the power of plants to help heal people and help make childbirth less painful and all of those things. And those were things that people weren't allowed to do. Those were God's things. And so it was kind of a bad time frame. And during that time frame, we had a young Persian Iranian genius in the Middle East named Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna, is the Latinized version of his name. And he really held court for Western herbal medicine and is now known as the father of modern medicine. And he was pretty brilliant, and he collected, and he was very compassionate too, and collected, codified, and advanced upon the Greco-Roman and Middle Eastern healing texts of that time. And for the most part, any of the history of medicine is also the history of herbal medicine, because it was only relatively recent that medicine did not include herbal medicine. And so he pulled together the text of Dioscorides and Hippocrates and Galen and others, and created some of his own texts that are still, valid today. He also created some of the first hospitals that were devoted to caring for sick people in humane ways, as opposed to, say like throwing them in jail or throwing them in really, disgusting places to ferry them off when they're not feeling well. He promoted hygiene and healthy living. He urged physicians to look at the whole person. And one of his classic medical and herbal texts is called the Canon of Medicine. And that's still relevant today. And it's also free. You can find it online and read through it. And so this is one time period of history. Another one, and this, now we're going to still be in Europe, because this is mostly, as a Western herbalist, I'm mostly familiar with our history of Western herbalism. And so for many centuries throughout Europe, many of the countries throughout Europe, folks were starting to try, this is around the 1500s, they were trying to make medicine, and herbal medicine specifically, more elitist thing. This is a really common theme throughout history, where only doctors or pharmacies, apothecaries, had the control of being able to make and dispense herbal remedies. And this actually is a law throughout a lot of Europe still today. And in England, King Henry VIII was a big proponent and fan of herbal medicine. And he actually created a charter that said that no, in England, in the UK, this is the Charter of 1543, that everyone has legal access, and that law still exists to some extent today, which is one of the reasons why England has a little bit more freedom around the practice of herbal medicine than some of the other countries of Europe have. For example, from what I understand, in France, it's illegal for an herbalist to dispense a tincture, because that's the job of the pharmacy apothecary instead. In New Hampshire and in the United States, we have a lot more freedom, which is nice. So another time of history, with the power and knowledge, whenever we have power and knowledge and wealth, it becomes really, really easy for the practice and access of medicine to become elitist. It's just what happens. It's really easy for that to happen. And so we have two folks that are really famous in herbal history who really challenge that and use their privilege to champion for everyday folks and their access to herbal medicine. So one is Nicholas Culpeper and the other is Samuel Thompson. And they were separated. They were not from the same exact time period, but both were disgusted by the really greedy aspects of modern medicine of their times, and often really ineffectual medicine of their times as well. They both had experiences where they saw people getting charged lots of money and not being helped, and then saw folks who were more attuned with the plants and were willing to serve folks without making a lot of money, and often ended up having better results in their healing at the same time. And so Culpeper, once he eventually came into some money of his own, he used that privilege to translate medical texts, which at that time, in his time, were all in Latin. So one of the ways that you can make herbalism and medicine not accessible is to write it in a language that only the really educated classes can read. And so he took those medical texts and translated them into the common language, which for him was English, and wrote the Culpeper's Herbal, or the Complete Herbal. And several other herbalists started to write other books like that. And these books were great because they were for the everyday folks, common printing press, anybody could buy them pretty easily. And as long as they could read, they could learn how to use plants to help heal themselves. And these books that were written for the everyday person, as well as many of the plants that they loved, things like St. John's wort and fennel and certain rose species, mullein, plantain, and burdock, all among them, they traveled across the Atlantic along with the settlers, and ultimately took root in the United States, and really changed North America's medicinal landscape forever. Maybe for good, maybe for bad, but they're definitely, major influencers of where we are right now. Later, in New Hampshire, in Alstead, New Hampshire, Samuel Thompson is another one of the folks who really made a big difference here. And so he, during his time frame of medicine, the modern medicine was really turning to things like mercury and antimony and bloodletting. Like, these were the really, like, what they would call heroic of that time period, even though by our standards, Samuel Thompson's herbal medicine was a little bit on the heroic side, but compared to what was being practiced. And so he, he had seen people not being healed well by herbal medicine, yet all by modern medicine, and yet, having to spend so much money to get really bad care and to be left for dead, and then have other folks go in and use herbs to make really dramatic improvements. And so he ended up becoming a real big champion for the plants, and was really fond of herbs that would support detoxification and then restoring vitality. So he was a big fan of plants like lobelia and cayenne, and he also really loved his pucum which to us now is a pretty harsh, but like I said, compared to those times, it was a pretty big difference. And, he did ultimately create a system to train herbal practitioners across the country. So really like increase the number of like herbal, I don't know if doctors is really quite the right word, but herbal healers, made it much more available. It was through a little bit of a multi-level marketing style scheme, but still he had a really big impact on bringing back this whole like school of herbal medicine as modern medicine was starting to go more towards chemical medicines. And his style of herbalism was a seed that ultimately grew into a lot of other schools of herbal medicine, including the eclectics, the physiomedicalists, the nature cures, naturopathic and osteopathic medicine teachings, as well as some of the official schools. And also a lot of the Thompsonian medicine, it traveled with settlers across to the Southwest, and you still see a lot of his influence in Dr. Christopher's School of Natural Healing, as well as the style of herbalism. If you go out to Utah or you connect with folks in the Mormon herbal community, you'll find that Thompsonian medicine is still pretty alive and well. And there's a really nice lecture you can watch for free through the American Herbalist Guild that Stephen Horn did, who lives in Utah and was originally raised Mormon, and he has a whole little history webinar on Samuel Thompson that you can check out. Let's move on to our little lovely ginkgo here, a beautiful but sad photo of ginkgo. So, not everybody was white and male and sometimes in power and educated. There were plenty of other people. And in fact, really the majority of the healers across the world have often been women and indigenous folks and people of color. And they have typically and still continue to be the primary healers in a lot of communities and providing medicine to those communities, often with really good skill, using really common everyday plants, and often serving with very little focus on needing to be paid or to be paid well or to be paid in money for the work that they do. But, unfortunately, due to racism, classism, as well as misogyny, they're not amongst the practitioners that generally had the high status and that had that sweeping influence influence of our medicine and how it's practiced. But there are two exceptions, and one is Florence Nightingale, and then another from a different time period and place is Hildegard von Bingen. And both of these were women who were highly educated for their times, were able to read and write in Latin and other languages, and they were also really caring, compassionate. In the case of Hildegard von Bingen, was also very spiritually connected, and really felt like the spiritual world and God and the plant world were all very connected. And so both these highly educated, caring women made big advancements in the way that medicine was practiced to make it more humane and more holistic. And they also wrote wellness and healing guides in the common language and translated, kind of like Culpeper had done, to translate things from Latin into the common language of the people, so that folks had that accessibility, that it wasn't just something that some doctor up in an office somewhere had access to. Another kind of tricky part of our culture is, we have a pretty intense history of rape and supremacy during the times of colonization, as well as the enslavement of Africans on plantations. And two plants that really stood out that, were among the many that were relied upon just for daily health of folks and of Indigenous and Black folks in those communities is blue cohosh root for Indigenous folks, especially in the Northeast, as well as cotton root bark throughout the plantations for enslaved African women, also quite popular throughout the Southwest and Latin America too. And these were plants that were utilized as emmenagogues and abortifacients that, when folks were being raped and impregnated, they were able to use these plants to have some amount of control over their reproductive rights. And, for example, with enslaved women, it was the practice, because if you could get somebody pregnant, you now had, more slaves as they grew up to have available to you. So, not only were you pregnant in a way that you didn't want to be, but your child would be born into this life of slavery. And so it's interesting, especially for cotton root bark, that, here's this plant that they were brought here to cultivate for nothing, and that they were able to use that plant in a way to gain some, minor amount of control over their lives and their health and well-being, in spite of everything so negative that was happening at the same time. So, whatever you think about reproductive rights, I think everybody can respect how challenging of a situation that can be, and how great it is to be able to have a plant that can create some amount of control and agency. And some of those lessons I've learned from herbalists like Karen Culpeper and Leah Penniman and other speakers as well, other BIPOC speakers. Yet another time throughout our history for enslaved Africans is when Africans were making the trek, the long, really dangerous trek north in the United States to freedom through the Underground Railroad, and really inspired by Harriet Tubman, who we all already know is a really amazing woman, and for everything that she did. And so she helped guide folks, and it's a little bit of a debate over how many. It may have been just 30 or 70, but that's still a lot, although some sources say in the hundreds. But regardless, she never lost a passenger on this really dangerous, long and scary journey that they would have in her multiple trips along the Underground Railroad to freedom. And part of the reason why she was so successful, there are many reasons, but one of them was her knowledge of plants, her skill as an herbalist and as a forager. And so she used wild forage foods to help keep people fed, and then also used just the right dose of a homemade opium poppy tincture that she would make, and she would put a little bit of it on bread and feed it to babies. Now, this is a really toxic plant, but she clearly knew her medicine well and knew just the right dose that would keep the baby really calm and sedate, because when you're trying to flee slavery across this Underground Railroad, a crying, screaming baby can attract unwanted attention. And so part of the reason that she was successful was because of her skill of utilizing really potentially toxic botanicals in a safe way to ensure everybody's freedom. She had pretty amazing skills and really selfless determination in spite of all of the disadvantages she had from the start, and she was able to make so many different improvements as a result. Lovely little bee balm there. These plants are really mostly there because they're beautiful and not because they specifically connect with what we're talking about. So flash forward a little bit later in history to the early 1900s. And in 1910, we have the Flexner Report that came out. So this is another pretty dark time in our history, depending upon your perspective. So the Flexner Report was released by funding of the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations with the assistance of the then fledgling American Medical Association. And modern medicine would often think of this as a really bright point of their history because it, advanced medicine and advanced medical education and was part of the increased devotion to the scientific method. But it also streamlined what was once a really vibrant and diverse practice of medicine. You had a lot of different people and different schools and different ways of practicing healing and medicine, even though they all sat for the same boards, but they had different perspectives and different ways of working. And with this, that really streamlined and cut out a lot of that diversity and made medical care something that was reserved for white, wealthy men in cities. And that's not just me being like, woke or in a negative way or anything like that. That's exactly what it did. And we're just now getting to the point of undoing some of that. And it's one of the primary causes of America's broken lineage of herbal medicine. We lost that herbal knowledge. This is one of the big reasons why we lost, at least in mainstream America, why we lost that connection to herbal medicine. So in just 25 years, we had 8 eclectic herbal medicine doctor schools, 9 homeopathic, 7 African American only, and 2 women only accredited medical schools that were open at the beginning of the 1900s were wiped from existence in just those 25 years after the Flexner Report came out. And so by 1940 or so, the only type of practice really was standard medical practice. There was a little bit, by a very thin thread, you had osteopathy and chiropractic that had tried to adapt and were able to survive on the fringes, but that was really it. And anything else, if it existed, went really underground or was lost. Of course, we had a lot of communities that were not served by this new standard of medicine. There was not accessible to them. Either physically wasn't present near where they were, or it was too expensive for them to access. And in communities like indigenous communities and rural communities, especially those that were generally underserved, their herbal medicine was never lost. So it's not that everybody lost their connection to herbal medicine during this time, but it's sort of the mainstream America. But there were definitely pockets that always used it and never lost that heritage. But for a lot of us, for a few decades and for a handful of generations, we just lost that connection, and we're still working to get it back and to learn it. So in the 1970s, enter our bright point in history. In the 1970s, the hippies, kind of brought about the herbal renaissance. Part of the reason they liked herbs was because, and this is something I learned from studying with herbalists who are hippies like Rosemary Gladstar and Michael Moore. And Michael Moore had an herb shop in Topanga Canyon in LA, where all the hippie folks were hanging out. And if you got sick, you didn't want to go to the hospital because they would test you for drugs, and everybody was on drugs. And so that got them more interested in herbs as a way of healing. And so it's kind of an interesting reason why we started to go back. And of course, we're back to nature, back to the land and all of that as well. So led by herbalists like Rosemary Gladstar, who's really one of our shining champions and one of the most amazing human beings you will ever meet, amazing, kind, generous person, who has had such a tremendous impact on the resurgence of herbalism in the United States. And we often refer to her as the fairy godmother of herbalism. And she, a lot of our herbal folks, Rosemary and others, were largely self-taught. They, just experimented with herbs. They had the 3 books that still existed during that time period on herbal medicine. And they may have also learned from rural old timers who are willing to share their tricks with them, and, and gradually built herbalism into what we have now. by the year 2000, which is about the time that I started really getting into herbs. I was starting a few years before that, but that was when I started really studying herbal medicine. Herbal medicine had become a lot more mainstream. It really had experienced a big boom right around that time. There was a huge influx of herb books that were published right around 2000. More and more herb schools have been opening up like pretty much every year since then. We have organizations and practitioners that are starting and or gaining ground over these last few decades. And we definitely still have a long way to go in a lot of different ways, but herbal medicine is continuing to grow and gain acceptance in this broader community of medicine and really improve in its accessibility and inclusivity. Still have a long way to go, but it's a lot better than where it was. And so kind of wrapping this up a little bit earlier than I intended, but we can chat. Actually, that's not true. I have more to say. So here we are. We're in a time and a place where herbs are increasing in sales every single year, and definitely since the pandemic, they've increased even more. There are more herb books than we can count that are coming out every year, every month. We have a new resurgence of herbal books these days, and new herb schools are opening up every year and increasing in student counts. And talking to all different herb schools across the country, some of that are BIPOC led, like Seed School and Seed Soil and Spirit School, which is actually in Canada. That's a BIPOC led herbal program that's pretty amazing. And, they've had like record numbers this year. Talking to folks at David Winston School, record numbers this year. Just talking to herbal schools across the country and the region, that like everybody's just, they're like, wow, like lots of people wanting to sign up and take classes on herbs, and the ability to do this online has also increased that accessibility and being able to reach different communities. So we've got that happening. We're really moving back to a time when everybody, hopefully in the not too distant future, will be able to go out into their yard or into their neighborhood and know at least a couple plants that they can rely upon for medicine to use for health, or go into their kitchen and use common culinary herbs or common kitchen spice herbs to be able to use as medicine to help heal themselves and their families, which is really, pretty exciting and amazing that we are transitioning in that way. So we're not there yet, but we're so much closer than we've been in a long time. So learning herbal medicine and practicing herbal medicine is really so much more than just learning how to use X herb for Y health concern, or, even something as important as saving money by making your own herbal remedies. It's also really life-changing. And I feel like I'm going to say the words life-changing more times than I should, but in the next few sentences, but it's totally true. So whether you're a newbie or a skilled herbalist, our understanding and deepening our roots helps us grow and heal in these changing times. And people are drawn to herbal medicine for a lot of different reasons. So, initially, especially with the pandemic, it gives us something to do. We can learn herbal medicine when we're stuck, the world is shut down and we're stuck at home, and, maybe some of us didn't even have jobs to go to. It can help us address current health concerns. We're drawn to it so that we can address our current health concerns or prevent or bolster us against potential threats, to help us save money on our health costs and, give us a little bit of independence there, to help us connect to something a little bit bigger and empower us in our own healthcare, so that we are not only relying upon others to make us healthy, but at least in some ways we have the knowledge and the skill set to be able to make improvements on our own. Some folks are, trying to discover medicine that's already surrounding in the kitchen cabinets and those wild spaces and gardens. It's that eye awakening, it's like, wait, there are medicinal things all around us all the time. And we want to learn what those are and how we can work with them so that we can be resourceful and adapt to challenging times when we may not have access to, say, things from another country or things from the store. Some of us come to herbal medicine and herbal medicine education as part of a calling because we want to change careers to something that maybe gives us more meaning, more agency, more flexibility, especially in the pandemic when a lot of people found themselves out of a job unexpectedly. Not that herbal medicine is like an easy guaranteed career, just to put a little bit of reality check in there, but it is a really beautiful potential career for which there is a lot of demand for. And also we did it to be able to better support others and in their own health struggles. And I think that's something, that's something that I've heard a lot of people emailing me and calling me and saying, I want to study herbalism. I want to be able to help others. And just having that in these challenging times, having this altruism of realizing that there are people around us, whether they're folks very close to us, or we're looking at broader, bigger communities and wanting to help those in need. Many people come to herbalism just out of simple curiosity, and then they quickly realize how life-changing and life affirming learning and working with the plants can be. So more than one student has told me after they've gone through a series or so, and that herbs have totally changed their lives. They were just doing it just for fun. They thought, hey, wouldn't it be neat to take an herb class? And now herbalism has become this really big and important part of their lives that has given their lives more meaning. And they find that they have whole kitchen cabinets that are devoted to their plants, and increasing swaths of their garden are being transitioned into medicinal plants devoted to their plant friends. And they adore their daily tea creations, and they love sharing remedies that they've made with others, and just really marvel at how learning the plants has connected them with the world around them. Because once you start to know and recognize what's around you, you just realize that you're surrounded by friends. And I want to show you a picture of one of my favorite friends, which is holy basil, which is not native to our area at all. It comes from places like India and Africa, but yet grows pretty well here during the summers. And it's just such a great asset to our gardens. So you don't need to be spiritual to work with herbs. I consider herbalism to be a pretty non-denominational thing, but the more you learn and connect with the plant world, the more you start to feel like you're part of something bigger, that we're connected to something bigger and more meaningful. So it's hard not to feel like there's a higher power or some vital life force surrounding us and supporting you as you delve into the plant world. And this is probably part of the reason why almost every religion and spiritual practice in the world utilizes plants and incorporates plants into their rituals. And this could be something like frankincense or copal or some other aromatic incense that gets burned, or the cleansing sweet smoke of dried cedar branches, or the clovey aroma of tulsi or holy basil in a pot as you brush by it, or even the feeling of being like reborn and refreshed when you take holy water and you dip pine boughs in it and then sprinkle. And these are rituals that I've actually, all of which that I've had the luxury of experiencing in different spiritual practices, and they're all pretty amazing ways in which herbs are used to cleanse spaces and create sacred spaces and bring prayers to the heavens and bring spirit into a space. And instead of appropriating and over harvesting spiritual plants from far-flung places and cultures, I really invite you to connect with the spiritual plants of your backyard, of your ancestry. And there's really so much, there's so many really amazing plants that we can connect with just through those two things. And that will not only offer respect to other cultures, but also will deepen our own relationship with the plants so that we can more fully connect with the plants and our spiritual practices. Reflecting on the Potawatomi tribe's lengthy sunrise ceremony of gratitude, Robin Wall Kimmerer notes in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which is beautiful and amazing, I highly recommend it. She says, many Native peoples across the world, despite myriad cultural differences, have this in common. We are all rooted in cultures of gratitude. Imagine raising children in a culture where gratitude is the first priority, the first thing that you do in a day. While expressing gratitude seems innocent enough, it's a revolutionary idea. Recognizing abundance rather than scarcity undermines an economy that thrives in creating unmet desires. She goes on to say that while economy needs emptiness, gratitude cultivates an ethic of fullness. And this is gratitude for the simple things that we all have access to in some way or another: the sun, the moon, the plants, the earth, the fish, the water, all these things that are around us are part of this very lengthy ceremony that the tribe has to give thanks to all these things at the very beginning of what they're doing, which is pretty beautiful. I know that I probably jump into things too much and don't always give gratitude, and I should, because I have a lot to be grateful for. So let's begin this weekend's New Hampshire Urban Garden Day with an event with reverence and gratitude for the plants, for our elders and our ancestors, for our farmers and our herbalists, for each other, for the planet, for all that we've lived through in this pandemic and throughout history as human beings, and the many, many, many ways in which plants and our advocates in health and justice have helped us not only survive, but to thrive and grow. So that's the end of my speech, but I hope that this really like kind of opens things up for you, creates a little bit more awareness and understanding and connection to the plants, to each other, and to our history. And also for those of you who are going to be joining us tomorrow at Urban Garden Day, just, you know, really realizing like what a special thing it is to connect and to appreciate and to grow together like that. So I'm done early. I didn't know how long that would take. I'm happy to field questions if anybody has any. Let me see. I think there might be something in the chat box or might not be. Oh, just nice things to say. Awesome. Thanks. So does anybody have any questions or comments? And I know that before we officially wrap up, I know Kellie is going to come on and say some announcements for Urban Garden Day. But before we do that, I'm just curious. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything? You can type it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourselves, and I'll shut up for a moment so you have an opportunity to speak. I see Kellie's mouth moving, but I don't know if she's speaking to us.
I was speaking. I wanted to say thank you so much for taking me up on the request to do this evening. It was absolutely wonderful to hear you talk again. It's been a while, what, 3 years since I was in class with you. It was amazing. And who knew 3 years ago when I walked into your class, I'd be the president of the Urban Garden Day today. And I also would like to encourage anybody that is wanting to ask a question to please step up and say something, questions, comments, anything, because that was just very inspiring and wonderful.
Thank you. We'll give you all another moment to see if anybody has anything they want to say. Maybe even something on how plants have touched your life. I'm guessing that everybody here, plants have touched your lives in one way. I know some of you.
Well, I would just like to say thank you again. It's really nice to have this time before we kick off this weekend to get a little inspiration and kind of reconnect. Really looking forward to coming to New Hampshire tomorrow. I've moved up to Vermont since I took Maria's backyard herbalist class like 12 years ago, and I never miss a chance to connect or hear you speak. And I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us tonight. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. I will only be there for a little bit, but hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Any other? And this doesn't have to be a like love on Maria. I like it and all, but it's really about loving on the plants. But I do appreciate the kind words. So, oh,
I had not, well, kind of a question, but also a love for holy basil. I came across someone who knew it from their ancestry, and they said it's in every one of their houses. This is a person from India, and usually by the front door. I'm like, oh, that's why I put her by the front door, you know, and just picked up on a lot of more information, filling in the gaps of the history. And so really, I think I missed one of your ritual herbs. You said frankincense, copal, cedar, holy basil, pine boughs, and there was one other. Was it cedar wood maybe? Or
I think those were all of them. I may have mumbled over my words and it sounded like there was one more. I mentioned cedar, not cedar, but pine boughs dipped in holy water, which
okay.
in the church that I was raised Catholic, and in the church, that was something they would often do during certain ceremonies of like, group baptism would be to dip pine boughs in the holy water and sprinkle them. And once I started to appreciate plant spirit medicine, I realized how many really beautiful ways in which like herbs have traditionally been used for spirituality that were incorporated into the Catholic rituals that I had not known growing up in the religion. It actually gave it even more meaning for me.
Thank you.
So, and sounds like we're, we were a small group, and I think everybody may have said what they wanted to say. So Kellie, do you want to come on and, kind of welcome people to the event tomorrow and make any announcements? And then I look forward to see, I'll kind of be quiet now, and I look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow.
Oh, thank you very much again, Maria. I appreciate you very, very much. So
And I
tomorrow
appreciate your work, because what you're doing is what you and Jessica and Susan and all of you folks are doing is not easy. So thank you all for your hard work and for jumping into it, and trial by fire.
Yes. I appreciate that. Oh my goodness. So tomorrow, our event starts at 8:30 with registration until 5:15 or 5:15. 9:15. Oh my gosh, I must need a cup of tea. From 9:15 to 9:30 is the opening circle. And then from 9:30 to 10:30, we're calling it the Kids Walking Labyrinth, but anybody can go through it. It's a 7-circle labyrinth with found objects through it. And then you could follow the path quietly and mindfully, learning how to be present with your thoughts as you go. Track 1 starts at 9:30 and runs to 10:40. We have a break from 10:40 to 11:10. And then from 11:10 to 12:20, we have track 2. And I'll go into the tracks in just a minute or two in case anybody's having any questions about that. We have lunch from 12:20 to 1:30, which is going to be provided by the Kearsarge Justice Alliance. They're providing a potluck style lunch for everybody, which is just amazing, amazing. Oh my goodness, there's so much listed here. I'm not reading this whole list. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just not going to do it. It's good. I'm just going to say that. It's good.
I'm going to pull it up and show it on the screen in just a moment.
Oh,
So
that would be
I'm
awesome.
actually working on that right now.
There is no charge for lunch, but donations would be appreciated, because all of the people that are involved are all volunteering. All the food has been donated. I mean, really. It's just amazing. Track 3 starts at 1:30 and runs to 2:40. Then there's another break from 2:40 to 3:10. During the afternoon break, Martin Joe and a bunch of musicians from and community leader from Southern New Hampshire are going to be performing. Track 3 starts at 3:10 and goes to 4:20. And we will be having a raffle. The puller of the raffle will be pulled during the break. No, just before the break. At 2:30, just before the last break. And there will also be a children's table tent open from 10 to 3. There'll be face painting, sand art, mandala coloring, and circle songs. Track 1 from 9:30 to 10:40 has I'm not going to pronounce this right. Ashkenazi Jewish herbalism.
Ashkenazi.
I apologize. I totally butchered it. More than chicken soup. And way of the woodcutter. Our track 2 from 11:10 to 12:20 is COVID herbal supporting and prevention with tending to the garden of your gut. Your gut is the soul of your well-being. Oh, I so agree. And track 3 is 130 to 240. Plant walk, a witchy wonder wander. Returning to our roots, getting to know the medicinal plants around your home. And track 4, our final track from 310 to 420 is nothing says roots as biodiversity more than mushrooms and mycelia network, plant medicine and indigenous views of plant people. I'm so excited. We have a great lineup this year, and I have to thank everybody for being involved in volunteering and helping us bring this all together. It has been a long couple of months in the throw together. It felt so much like a throw together. Are we going to do it live? Are we going to do it virtual? What's going on? But we got there. We definitely got there. So I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow in person, with or without masks. We do have it up there with the masks. If you have been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. We will have hand sanitizer and masks at the registration booth, just in case anybody has forgotten them. Water will be provided. It's supposed to be 90 degrees. Please remember to bring hydration if you are presenting or being a vendor. Please, please, please remember to bring water. And I hope everybody has a good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Kelly, and everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. It sounds amazing. And there'll be tons of plants there too.
Yes, there will.
Plant sale. So have a great night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.